Hello, I'm Doug and this is the Taste and Sensibility channel. And today on 10 Tastes for Whiskey Drinkers, number 4, Fortified Wines, we're looking at how all the various fortified wines like sherry or port or Madeira or what's that other one, are used in finishing whiskeys. Well, not so much how they're used, just what they taste like. Most people who have some sort of favorite wine cask finish don't even own a bottle or can't tell you what it tastes like. They tell you what effect it has in the whiskey, but most people don't have the actual wine. So I've been a big collector of fortified wines to investigate how these things affect Scotch malt whiskey or bourbons or ryes or other things that can be finished in these casks. So all this 10 Tastes for Whiskey Drinker stuff was shot in December of 2019, and then all the COVID stuff happened. So it's just been sitting around gathering dust, but I finally got it organized enough to come back and edit these things and put things together. But this particular one did not have a good intro or outro, and some of the transitions are still kind of abrupt based on the material I have and what I shot, but too bad for that. But this one I just had to fix. So this is my little intro before I go into a whole table full of sherries that I do, and then 4 or 5 ports, and then a Madeira, and the Marsala, that Italian one. I mentioned quite a few of the famous finished whiskeys throughout the little segments where I'm checking what the wines taste like. But at the end of this, I'll come back and mention some of the less famous ones. I'm just have a line them up here, and I won't taste them all, but am going to taste this one. One of my big gripes is that I don't really like sherry finished bourbons. And then I went out and spent my own money, $150, on this Wild Turkey Master's Keep Revival, an Oloroso finished old Wild Turkey blend. So I'll come back at the end and taste that, but I'll mention some of the other things. So we will see how this goes. Put together in 2 different years. So first off, we're looking at sherry, which is generally a product of Spain. Jerez, Spain, I think, or Jerez. Spain is the origin of the original sherry. I've got a couple of California versions here, 3 California sherries, and then 2 that are from Spain. So there's several different kinds of sherries, and I got used to drinking cream sherry before I knew anything about fortified wines or how these were used in finishing whiskeys or maturing whiskeys. So from here on over, these are all cream sherries, which are kind of like a dessert wine, sweeter, a lot of nutty character usually. And these are, 3 of these are American. So this is Fairbanks sherry, which is really Gallo. It's just a brand name of Gallo. This is Taylor, made in New York. This is Christian Brothers, made in California. This is Harvey's Bristol Cream, UK company, importing Spanish sherry. And I think that's a Beam company, Beam Suntory. Produced and bottled in origin by Beam Spain, SL. I don't know what that means, but sounds like Beam Suntory. And then this is a Spanish brand doing Spanish sherry. So I was just going to describe the character. Look how big this thing is. It's a 1.5 liters. And cheap. It's like $10 or $12. And it's not that much. And the taste seems to be as good as the others for the most part. So we'll taste. Look how dark it is. It's brown. All these cream sherries are brown. These other things vary a bit more. And all these are 17 to 18% alcohol by volume. So that's the level of fortification. Lots of these are in that 18 to 20 range. So I'll read them off as we go. Get grapey notes on the nose. grapey and something sweet. There's not a lot of nose to it. On the palate, it's nutty, a little spicy, but it's like a combination of baking spices that are just blended together and hard to unravel. Definitely a layer of dark fruits, dried fruits, raisins, prune, plum, date, fig, that sort of thing. But I would say the nuttiness is stronger. It's an almond or an almondy note that is stronger than the fruity notes. So that's the cheaper California stuff. I was also going to pour this Spanish, it's called Solera, but I don't think it's really any kind of Solera system for aging things. It's also dark. Let me read a little of this. This is 75% Palomino grapes, 25% Pedro, Ximinez. Dark mahogany in color, velvety soft on the palate, blah, 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 blah. Noval chilled. This is 18% by volume. So I don't chill these. I've never felt the need to. They taste good at room temperature and they work just fine. Oh, definitely deeper, richer nose than the California cherry from Gallo. Wow, it might be coffee and chocolate. A little grapey stuff there. And maybe even nutty on the nose. Palate is, a notch or two more complicated, more complex than the California sherry. Here's a deep sweetness. You get all those dark fruits. They're a level above the nuttiness. They're more prominent than the nuttiness, which is in there, but that's the lower level thing here. So I don't find any of these too sweet. Just as a sipping wine before or after dinner. And maybe that's why I have so many. I was looking to see what the range of flavors was. But these are just what I drink. I've never seen anyone claim to have finished any whiskey of any kind in any cream sherry barrels. They usually just say sherry or they specify some type, and it's never cream from what I see. So these are just my drinking sherries. And I'm giving you the notes that I'm used to and what attracted me to drinking the sherry. And then I'm getting into the other kinds that actually are used for finishing whiskeys. Or actually maybe the whole maturation of the whiskey could be in a sherry cask. So that Solera is really good. And definitely a level more complex than the California sherry was. Osborne, a Spanish company with Spanish product from Jerez, Spain. Sherry, medium, 15% of volume. So again, we have a light brown liquid, darker than most whiskeys. So the medium is referring to the sweetness level, I think. It's not quite dry. It's not quite a cream sherry. It's something in between. That's what they're trying to indicate here. The nose is more savory, meaty. I don't really get the nuttiness. I don't get grape notes or the fruit notes. And it's not necessarily a good nosing glass. So it's drier, for sure. It's not as sweet as the cream sherry, either cream sherry was. And the darkness is reminiscent of coffee, chocolate. There's a low level nuttiness there in the background. Okay, there's some dark fruit notes. It's fairly complex and not as sweet. And I would do okay sipping on this, but I probably prefer these for my usual uses. This is definitely drier and would not be contributing a lot of sweetness to anything, just fruit notes. Now here's a couple of Oloroso sherries. So Alfonso, Spanish company from that region of Spain, and Lustau, Spanish company from that region of Spain. Oloroso, Don Nuno. So I'm going to pour this one. This is a brand that's famously used in some whiskey finishing. So Oloroso is prominent on the labels of many Scotch whiskies as one of the finishing types, or maybe the whole maturation was done in an Oloroso cask. So again, dark brown for a wine. It's unusual. And it's dark for a whiskey too, unless you're drinking bourbon. On this nose, I don't get no sweet jumps out. Very few grape notes jump out. Might be the dark fruits. It's kind of a subdued nose. Not a lot of nuttiness. Oh, drier than this one was. Nuttiness. Dark fruits are subdued, rounded off, not prominent. And there's kind of a grapiness, kind of a raisiny character. And the lack of sweetness is really making it a little pointy. I can see how people might prefer this to the sweeter ones. It's almost a peppery finish. I assume they're using more European oak. I always think of European oak as a little more spicier. Brings more spicy finishes to whiskeys. So I might do the same to these wines. So it's kind of a sparkly, bright, peppery finish. But not sweet, not especially fruity. I expected more out of these guys. Okay, so interesting. Not fruit-based notes I get there. This guy is PX, Pedro Ximinez. Natural sweet wine, 2014. In the small half bottle, it's a 375. It was about $30. And it is 17% alcohol by volume. So this is a thick, syrupy, or redder. Ooh, good pop. Yep, it's not especially red. So some reflections I'm getting moving it around in the light. This is thicker and syrupy looking. Now I remember it being very sweet. And this is one of the specific names or varieties of sherry that's touted for Scotch finishing and maturation. Smells different. Sweetness and fruit are coming up at me. Raisins. Raisins, dates, prunes, figs. The whole set of them are in there. And the sweetness is pretty evident. I'm expecting it to be sweet. And it's right there on the nose, about ready to jump in my mouth. Oh, wow. Wow, whole level of grape juice that I didn't find in any of these things. Half grape juice, half prune juice, half raisin juice. Squish out all those dates and figs and raisins. and pull the juice out of them, and it might taste like this. Sweet, sweet, sweet with lots of fruit. Grapes and raisins predominating, I'd say. And I'm looking for the nuttiness, and it's down below all those other things. The fruits are so strong. The grape juice is so strong. Oh man, that's good. And expensive. Wow, yeah. Okay, so I see why people like PX. And then a couple of oddballs. Well, they're odd for it's odd when they're specified for finishing or maturation of Scotch whiskey. So this one is Fino, dry sherry. This one is Manzanilla. And I think they use the same grapes. I think they use the same kind of process to get to the sherry, but they're produced and aged several miles apart, 8 or 10 miles apart. One's more coastal, and one's more inland, and that explains the differences that people taste between these two. So I'm just going to taste one, and look how light it is. It is not like these other sherries. So it is very pale, very little color. This is Fino from Inocente. Fino dry sherry. Let's see the ABV. 15% by volume. So some sherries seem to be held at 18 and some sherries seem to be held at 15%. Or other numbers. I don't know. Explanations for those. Facts. It's not fruity, it's not grapey on the nose. There's a note there, but it's not food or drink based. I'm not sure what I'm smelling. It reminds me of something, but I'm not recalling it. It probably is a food. It's like a nice light white wine. A little more punch than some wines, ABV wise, or it's dry. It's not especially grapey. I'm looking, it's got slight hints of the other sherries. Maybe the touch of the nuttiness, or like this drier sherry here, the Osborne. It's just a hint of those flavors. Can't quite tell it's made from fruit. Doesn't quite have the nutty character. It's just barely detectable. And I've noticed a couple of Scotch whiskies that are finished in these two varieties of sherry cask. When the distilleries do mature or finish their whiskies in sherry casks, here's a few of the famous ones. Glendronach is known for heavy-handed use of sherry flavoring from casks. Macallan, of course, is well known as a sherry-finished, sherry-matured Scotch whiskey. And Bunnahabhain, the 12-year-old, is known as a sherry-matured whiskey. So these are certainly sometimes blends of bourbon-matured whiskeys and sherry-matured whiskeys, and they blend them together to fit the taste profile. And here is Redbreast, single pot still Irish whiskey that is finished in a Lustau Oloroso cask. So they put Lustau right on the label. Maybe they're a corporate brother or sister. But it shows off in here. And then, as I've said before, I don't find these finishes work as well for bourbons, but here's what I like. The Bellemeade Sherry bourbon, sherry cask bourbon, is one that I find successful. This one tastes good. I might like the regular bourbon a tad more. So that's the sherry portion of the show. So now moving along in our fortified wine journey, we come to port. And I have 2 ruby ports. I've got a black port, I have a tawny port, and then a white port. So we're going to sample all these and see what's in the bottle. This is a Taylor Fladgate late bottled vintage port 2011. This is 20% ABV. And it's very dark. I'd say I've had about half the bottle. I found all these darker ports very, very fruity. You'd think they might be sickeningly sweet or syrupy sweet, but they don't turn out that way. No more sweet than just regular grape juice. It smells grapey on the nose. And that's not a great nosing glass. So I would say it's grapey, there's a little bit of a wine character. Not quite as sweet as just regular red or purple grape juice. It's got a little bit of a wine character, maybe smoke. Maybe some oak, not smoke. But that is a good wine taste. It's very, very fruity. Can't really tell the extra alcohol is in there, but it's fortified. I think the ports are fortified for the same reason the sherries were, to make them last longer when you send them on a long voyage. So port is one of those protected domains of origin, like champagne. So all these come from Portugal. So this is nice, fruity, sweet enough, but not syrupy. So that's good. That would not be bad as a finish for most whiskeys, or let's say most Scotch whiskeys. Next we come to Graham's Fine Ruby Port. This is 19% by volume ABV. Since 1820, rich and full body, generous aromas, red fruits, and flavors of blackberry. I'm getting fruits, wine type notes, and maybe oak. The flavor is just a touch more wine-like. Something like a red wine, but sweeter, fruitier than most red wines. And there's a touch of tannins that I'm ascribing to the oak and not to the grape skins. Although I am no expert on wine, especially red wine, or all these other kinds, but this is very similar to this, about the same, I'd say. To my poor taster and smeller. So these are good. These, I've been drinking these. They're good with dinner, good after dinner, good before dinner. So very fruity. No more sweet than grape juice. Less sweet than grape juice, actually. Next we move on to my newest acquisition, which is Noval Black Port. Again, a product of Portugal, as all the ports must be. And I don't know that it's any darker. It probably is. Just a shade darker than the other two. Oh yeah. Darker. These look like the darkest sherries over here that I ever see. This is darker. And this is 19.5% ABV. So they're definitely fortified. I'm getting deeper, rich fruit notes and deeper, older. There's an oakiness to it. Do they do anything with oak in this? Because I keep getting some, but I don't know. I need to do a little more research. I just need to know more. Let's taste. I'd say not dramatically different than these. It comes out darker. You'd think it would have a richer taste. The nose seemed darker and richer. I guess the taste is too. It's just a shade darker, richer, deeper. Dates, plums, raisins type things. Not so much red fruits, but darker fruits. And it's not very sherry-like. But it recalls the dark fruits that a lot of sherries do. So this is very similar really to these. So all about the same, especially if you're doing a finish, I would think. So that's pretty nice. Now Tawny, I think, refers to the color. This is 20% by alcohol. Ramos Pinto, RP10, Tawny, 10 years old. And the color is much lighter. It's much more reminiscent of a sherry. Oh, okay. It's still dark. It's just not deep red, purple. Wow, I don't remember it being that dark. So on the nose, I don't get nearly the deep red fruit grape notes that I got on these things. Or the dark fruits. It's fruity, but I can't say I recognize what the fruit is. My nose is not connecting it to grapes for me. And on the palate, oh, it's a lighter version of these. It's still not that grapey. It's more towards a sherry. A little bit of nuttiness. A little bit of a grapey note you might get in a red wine. Okay, yeah, it's got some grape. But it is toned down considerably, and some nuttiness like a sherry is in there. So Tawny Port's a different animal than these guys. And boom, that 20% alcohol becomes noticeable after a few sips. So, all very good, somewhat different when you go from type to type. Now, let's open up this white port for the first time. I had a bottle of white port for quite a while and enjoyed it, and then it went away. So I had to get a new one. So this is my display bottle. And you can see it's not that different than a white wine. Maybe a little yellow, but pretty much in the ballpark for a white wine. And this has been chilled, so it might be too cold to nose and taste properly. Giving a little wine-like nose. A little bit grapey. And tell there's alcohol there. Did I say this? 19.5% ABV. Oh, it's like this one toned down. The fruit notes are lighter. It's more white wine-like, with a lot of fruit character. Grapey. Apple, pear, the tartness of apples and pears. More than the sweet parts. Something light and fruity. Maybe a hint of a citrus note. A grapefruit, an orange oil, lemon oil. Not the sourness or the citric acid part, but the peel and the oil notes are on the citrusy side. So way lighter than this one, way lighter than these, of course. And that could be an interesting finish for some Scotch whiskey, I would think. And then just as a reference point to show you what people do with these, here is Glenmorangie Quinta Rubin, port cask finish, aged 14 years. So this is their normal 12-year stuff, aged in bourbon barrels, and then they put it into port casks for 2 more years of aging. So this is pretty famous. This is part of their regular lineup, although this is the old packaging. They've got a newer version now. And I'm not going to pour it and taste it here. And then the bourbon version of port finishing is, the famous example is Angel's Envy. And I've had this bottle for a couple of years. I never ever connected with it. I never got the port to really go along with bourbon flavors. So I never understood it, I never got it, I never tasted it, smelled it, anything. Can't say I'm a reliable indicator of finishes, but I don't think bourbon gets along with these fortified wine finishes the way that Scotch whiskey does. Malts, barley malt, just is a nice delicate spirit that interacts with those things better. Bourbon is a stronger, punchier set of flavors. It's already sweet on its own in a lot of cases, and the interaction is very spirit dependent. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and that's probably all I need to say for now. And now we'll move on to the next thing. So the 2 last fortified wines I want to talk about here are Rainwater Madeira, which is from Portugal. This is Sandeman's Rainwater Madeira. Sandeman's a port maker. Maybe they do sherries, I don't know. I don't know that much about the company. But this is 19% alcohol by volume. Medium dry, it says in the back here. And it's got some color. It kind of looks like a sherry. But I don't know the difference technically between Madeira and other fortified wines. I don't know if it's a regional thing or a process thing. I don't get a lot of grape notes on it. Something grassy and herbal on the nose. And then this is in the grape nosing glass. But taste is the main thing since we're talking about finishing casks. Oh, it's very sherry-like. It's a little nutty. It's not very sweet. Definitely grapey. You can see how it's connected to brandy. I can get the same darker, thicker, deeper grape notes that I pick up in a lot of brandies and cognacs. But it's not sweet. It's grapey, nutty. A little bit of the nuttiness I find in a lot of sherries. So that is good, and it's not all that sweet. It would be a good after dinner wine. So this is good and wouldn't hurt a malt whiskey at all. And over here we have Marsala from Colombo brand. Marsala is an Italian wine. This one is 18% by volume, and it says sweet on the label. So we'll find out, but it certainly is darker. Looks thick and syrupy. So definitely more syrupy, thicker, still grapey, raisiny. And it's not sickeningly sweet, it's just sweeter than this one. So that's not bad at all. That would be good in cooking. So I think these are something like $20 bottles, but I tried to get decent ones that would represent their genus. And this is rich enough with enough flavors that it could go in the sherry direction. It's got dark fruits, raisin, prune, date type things. So I could definitely match up to a lot of sherries that Scotch whiskies are finished in. So that's the last two. Okay, so I hope that very thorough review of various fortified wines was not too exhausting for you, but now we've got a little bit more. I'm going to pour one, but only taste this one and describe all these others, because they've been seriously affected by fortified wine finishes or maturation. So I'm pouring a nice pour of my Wild Turkey Master's Keep Revival, which is old Wild Turkey, carefully selected and matured in 20-year-old Oloroso sherry cask by Eddie Russell. So this will sit out until I'm done describing these. I've always had a problem with sherried bourbons, with sherry finished bourbons, and for some reason I went out and spent $150 on this because I know I'm going to like it at the end, I think. But I just have to work on it. When I come across something I don't like at first, I start asking questions. Well, why do other people like it? What is it that I don't like? Let's get specific. Let's investigate. So this will just be part of my investigation. But over here, in some of my favorite stuff, we have a lot of scotches. We're starting off with Glenfarclas 17, single malt scotch from Scotland, and it's probably totally matured in sherry casks. Some of them might be refills and overly used, but there is a nice subtle sherry note to all their things. Annock 18 is from Knockdo Distillery, and it doesn't say anywhere on the label. It says unchill filtered, it says natural color and 46%, but it does not say sherry finish anywhere. But you taste this stuff and you go, yeah, just full of sherry flavors. Another one, which you may not have heard of, is Lecheg 18. The 18 and not the others have a strong sherry influence. Let's see, this is only finished in sherry, I believe. But it's smoky and peaty. I think they use Isla peat. It tastes like Isla, but they're on the Isla mull. Mulls. Yeah, I shouldn't do this, should I? Isla's down here. Mull is up here, I believe. So, peat haters, be warned. Don't go after Lecheg or Lechik. It's highly peated. And then, of course, everyone knows Lafroig is, but this is Kerchus, port in wine cask finish. So the 2020 release of Kerchus is port and wine cask finish. So I tasted all over that. Okay, here's an Irish whiskey, the Whistler, single malt, aged 7 years, natural cask strength. This is totally matured in bourbon cask for I don't know how long, and then they finish in sherry cask. Strong sherry influence there. It's good. I like it. Here's a rum, Four Square Rum Distillery, port cask finish. Exceptional cask selection. This was bottled in June of 2014. Cask storage 9 years. Bourbon and port used in the maturation and finishing. I think I bought this on Ralphie's recommendation. It's really good. And I think I can taste the port in the middle of all that other complex sweetness from old rum. Okay, a couple of 3 American single malts here. Let's go. Westland Sherrywood, 46% from Washington State. And I think Stranahan's is fairly famous. They do a great single malt in Denver. And this is their sherry cask finish with this beautiful maroon label. And you can definitely taste it. And then finally here we have from Texas, Balcones Hechiceros. This is a 10th anniversary special edition. So I don't think you're going to see it every year or get it all the time. But what we have here is 61.5% ABV, Texas single malt, whiskey finished in port casks, and you can taste it there. So these things are wonderful in showing off a craft distillery type presentation, and then the extra feature of the the fortified wine cask finishing or maturation. So I enjoy all these things. But what I enjoy much less is sherry finished bourbons. So I said the Belle Meade sherry cask stuff was okay. I've bought a bottle of Joseph Magnus, the regular bourbon, the $100 stuff. Yeah, might be less. But I'm still deciding about that one. Lots of people like it. And then I'm working my way through the Revival from Wild Turkey. So let's do a little smell and taste here. Smells old and musty, like some corn-based whiskey. Nothing especially fruity on the note. Not sure. Rye might be in the mash bill. Just a hint of acetone that tells me a lot of times rye's in there somewhere. So the nose doesn't say a lot, but here we go into the palate. Okay, it's not fighting. I get a few sherry notes and they're not loud. And they're not fighting with the bourbon. I get the bourbon stuff, I get the corn and some sweetness. And I get more wood than I usually do in Wild Turkey. So it's starting to cross over into older non-food things, leather, wood, tobacco, those kinds of notes, so that you can tell there's some age there and old stuff that you don't get in most turkeys. There's a little bit of a sourness, a tartness to it that I'm not usually getting on Wild Turkey. So I'm not disliking it, it's just not. This would be the last Wild Turkey product I would go to. I've got all the regular expressions, I've got all the Russells, I've got a Long Branch even, and I've got Decades from the Master's Keep collection, but this is my least favorite, and I've got plenty to work with and plenty of time to figure out if I'm ever going to like it. So I'm a step more in the favorable direction today than I have been in the past. It might be related from tasting all these other things in the meantime. So, hey, this has been a long enough video. You are all released to go do what you normally do. So, come back again, and that's all for now.
Understand the things I do. They never beg me to stop drinking.